Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Coprich. I'm a musician and performer here in the Southern California area, and I am noticing during our time of coronavirus and quarantine, so many artists and kind people reaching out to read stories to children, provide music through social media and live streams, and I just thought I would do my part in my own unique way. So, I'm going to be starting a series where I read one of my weird little classics from when I was a kid. This is called The Stranger by author Caroline B. Cooney, published in 1993. I'm not entirely sure how I came across this book, but it was always a favorite of mine. And while we are social distancing and trying to keep ourselves sane, hopefully, you can enjoy the story with me, revisit. I will be reading a chapter every day until we are all free to go about our lives again, but I'll finish the book. So if you enjoy it, you will get to hear the end. So let's start with the sort of back cover, so give you a flavor of what to expect over the next coming days. Again, this is The Stranger by Caroline B. Cooney. It says, "From the first moment she sees him in class, Nicoletta is drawn to Jethro, fascinated by his dark, mysterious face. She is attracted yet repelled, interested but afraid. Nicoletta becomes obsessed, unable to think of anything but this strange boy. But she knows so little about him, until she follows him to a deserted cave on the edge of town and learns the truth. Jethro is not like the others. No, not at all. He has a terrifying secret. A secret no one must ever find out." All right, my friends, here we are. The Stranger, Chapter 1. It was cold in the music room. Somebody had cracked the windows to freshen the stale school air, but Nicoletta had not expected her entire life to be chilled by the drafts of January. "Nicky," said the music teacher, smiling a bright, false smile. Nicoletta hated nicknames, but she smiled back anyway. "I called you in separately because this may be a blow. I want you to learn the news here and not in the hallway in front of the others." Nicoletta could not imagine what Miss Quincy was talking about. Yesterday, tryouts for madrigal singers had been completed. Miss Quincy required the members to audition every September and January, even though there was no question as to which 16 would be chosen. Nicoletta, of course, as she had been for 2 years, would be one of the 4 sopranos. So her first thought was that somebody was hurt, and Miss Quincy was breaking it to her. In a childlike gesture of which she was unaware, Nicoletta's hand caught the left side of her hair and wound it around her throat. The thick, shining gold turned into a comforting rope. "The new girl," said Miss Quincy. "Anne Louise." Miss Quincy looked at the chalkboard on which a music staff had been drawn. "She's wonderful," said Miss Quincy. "I'm putting her in madrigals. You have a good voice, and you're a solid singer, Nicky. Certainly a joy to have in any group, but Anne Louise has had voice lessons for years." Nicoletta came close to strangling herself with the rope of her own yellow hair. Madrigals? The chorus to which she had poured her life? The chorus that toured the state, whose concerts were standing room only? The 16 who were best friends? Who partied and carpooled and studied together as well as sang? "I'm sorry," said Miss Quincy, as she looked sorry too. She looked, to use an old and stupid phrase, as if this hurt her more than it hurt Nicoletta. "Since each part is limited to 4 singers, I can't have you both. Anne Louise will take your place. The wind of January crept through the 1-inch window opening and iced her life. How could she go on with high school if she were dropped from madrigals? She had no activity but singing. Her only friends were in madrigals. I'll be alone, Nicoletta thought. A flotilla of lonely places appeared in her mind. Cafeteria, bus, hallway, student center. Her body humiliated her. She became a prickly mass of perspiration, sweaty hands, lumpy throat, tearful eyes. Doesn't it count, she said desperately, trying to marshal intelligent arguments, that I've never missed a rehearsal? I've never been late? I've been in charge of refreshments? I'm the one who finds ushers for the concert, and I'm the one who checks the spelling and the programs. And we'd love to have you keep doing that, said Miss Quincy. Her smile opened again like a zipper separating her face halves. For 2 years, Nicoletta idolized Miss Quincy. Now an ugly puff of hatred filled her heart instead. I'm not good enough to sing with you, she cried out. But you'd love to have me do the secretarial work? I'm sure Anne Louise has had lessons in that too. Thanks for nothing, Miss Quincy. Nicoletta ran out of the music room before she broke into sobbing and had the ultimate humiliation of being comforted by the very woman who was kicking her out. There had been no witnesses yet, but in a few minutes everyone she cared about would know. She, Nicoletta, was not good enough anymore. The standards had been raised. Nicoletta was just another ordinary soprano. Nicoletta was out. There was a narrow turn of hall between the music rooms and the library. Nicoletta stood in the dark silence of that space, trying to control her emotions. She could hear familiar laughter. Madrigal friends coming to read the list of the chosen. She thought suddenly of her costume. The lovely crimson gown with the tight waist and the white lace high at the throat. The tiny crown that sat in her yellow hair. People said that medieval look suited her, that she was beautiful in red. And beautiful she always felt, spun gold with an angel's voice. Miss Quincy followed her into the safety zone into the dark little hallway. Go down to guidance now, Nikki, she said in a teachery voice. Sign up for something else in the magical time slot. I'll sign up for bomb making, thought Nicoletta, or arson. She did not look at Miss Quincy again. She walked in the opposite direction from the known voices, taking the long way around to the guidance counselor. In this immense high school with its student body of over 2,000, she was among strangers. You had to find your place in such a vast school, and her place had been madrigals. With whom would she stand now? With whom would she laugh and eat and gossip? Of course, in the guidance office, they pretended to be busy, and Nicoletta had to sit 40 minutes until they could fit her in. The chair was orange plastic, hideous and cold, the same color as the repulsive orange kitchen counters in Nicoletta's repulsive new home. Her parents had gotten into deep financial troubles. Last autumn, amid tears and recrimination, the Storms family had to sell the wonderful huge house on Fairest Hill. Oh, how Nicoletta had loved that house! Immense rooms, expanses of windows, layers of desks, acres of closets. She and her mother had poured themselves into decorating it, occupying every shopping hour with the joys of wallpaper, curtains, and accessories. Now they were in a tiny ranch with ugly, crowded rooms, and Nicoletta was sharing a bedroom with her 11-year-old sister, Jamie. In their old house, Jamie had her own room, an own bath. Jamie had had 3 closets for herself. Jamie had had her own television and 2 extra beds so she could have sleepovers every weekend. The ranch house had only 2 bedrooms, so now Jamie slept exactly 6 feet from Nicoletta. The 72 most annoying inches in the world. Nicoletta had actually liked her sister when they lived in the big house. Now the girls could do nothing except bicker, bait, and fight. Fairest Hill. Nicoletta always thought the name came from some fairy tale of Snow White. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And in those pretty woods, on top that gentle sloping hill, in that lovely house, she, Nicoletta, had been the fairest of them all. Now she could not even sing soprano. It was difficult to know who made her maddest. Her parents for poor planning, the economy for making it worse, Miss Quincy for being rotten, mean, and cruel, or Anne Louise for moving here. Within a few minutes, however, it was the guidance counselor making her maddest. "Let's see," said Mr. Parsons. "The available half-year classes, Nicoletta, are art appreciation, study skills, current events, or oceanography." He skimmed through her academic files. "I certainly recommend study skills," he said severely. She hated him. "I'm not taking current events," she thought, "because I sit through television news every night from 5 to 7 as it is. I'm not taking oceanography because deep water's the scariest thing on earth. I'm not taking study skills just because he thinks I should," which leaves art appreciation. Art for the non-artistic. Art for the pathetic and left behind. "I'm signing you up for study skill," said Mr. Parson. "No, art appreciation." "If you insist," said Mr. Parsons. She insisted. That night, as a break in the fighting with Jamie, Nicoletta received 3 phone calls from other madrigal singers. Rachel, her sidekick, the other first soprano next to whom she had stood for 2 lovely years, was crying. This is so awful," she sobbed. "Doesn't Miss Quincy understand friendship or loyalty or anything?" Kathy, an alto, so low she sometimes sang tenor, was furious. "I'm in favor of boycotting madrigals," said Kathy. "That'll teach Mrs. Quincy a thing or 2. Cristo, the lowest bass and handsomest boy, also phoned. Everybody at one time or another had had a crush on Christopher Hannon. Christopher had grown earlier than most boys. At 15, he had looked 20, and now at 17, he looked 25. And he was broad-shouldered and tall and could have grown a beard to his chest had he wanted to. Nicoletta was always surprised that she and Cristo were the exact same age. "Nicky," said Cristo, "this is terrible. We've all argued with Miss Quincy. She's sick. That's what I say. Demented." Nicoletta felt marginally better. At least her friends stood by her and perhaps would get Miss Quincy to change her mind and dump this horrible Anne Louise. "I have to take art appreciation instead," she said glumly. Cristo moaned. "Duds," he told her. "I know. Be brave, we'll rescue you. This Anne Louise cannot possibly sing like you, Nicky." She entered the art appreciation room the following day feeling quite removed from the rest of the pathetic specimens supposed to be her classmates. Cristo, Kathy, Rachel, and her other friends would turn this nightmare around. In a day or so, she'd be back rehearsing like always with a cowed and apologetic Miss Quincy. Without interest, Nicoletta took her new text and its companion workbook and sat where she was told, in the center of the room. A quick survey of the other students told her she had laid eyes on none of these kids before. It was not a large class, perhaps 20, half boys, which surprised her a little. Did they really want to appreciate art, or were they too refusing to take study skills? Her teacher, Mr. Morrison, of whom she had never heard of, let alone met, showed slides. Nicoletta prepared to go to sleep, which was her usual response to slides. But as the room went dark and the kids around her became shadows of themselves, her eye was caught by not the Van Gogh or the Monet painting on the screen, but by the profile of the boy in front of her, one row to her left. He had the most mobile face she had ever seen. Even in the dusk of the quiet classroom, she could see him shift his jaw, lower and lift his eyes, tighten and relax his lips. Several times he lifted a hand to touch his cheek, and touched it in a most peculiar fashion, as if he were exploring it, as if it belonged to someone else, or as if he had not known until this very second that he even had a cheek. She was so fascinated she could hardly wait for the slideshow to end. "Well, that's the end of today's lecture," said Mr. Morrison, flipping the lights back on. The boy remained strangely dark. It was as if he cast his own shadow in his own space. His eyelashes seemed to shade his cheeks, and his cheeks seemed full of hollows. His hair was thick and fell onto his face, sheltering him from stares. Nicoletta, who had never had an art-type thought in her life, wanted to paint him. How weird, she thought. Maybe Mr. Morrison put him in the class just to inspire us. Perhaps this is how Van Gogh and Monet got started, emotionally moved by a stranger's beautiful profile. Never had the word stranger seem so apt. There was something genuinely strange about the boy. Essentially different. But what was it? Nicoletta could not see straight into his eyes. He kept them lowered. Not as if he were shy, but as if he had other things to look at than his surroundings. Class ended. People stood. Nicoletta watched the boy. He did not look her way nor anybody else's. He did not seem aware of anyone. He left the room with lightness of step that did not fit his body. His body was more like Christo's, yet his walk might have been a dancer's. Nicoletta rarely initiated friendships. She intended to let friendships come to her, and it always had, through classmates or seatmates, through group lessons or neighbors. But she wanted to look into this boy's eyes, and unless she spoke to him, she would not have the privilege. Privilege, she thought? What a strange word to use. What do I mean by that? "Hi," she said to his departing back. "I'm Nicoletta." The boy did not register her voice. He did not turn. He might have been deaf. Perhaps he was deaf. Perhaps that was his mastery, his closure from the rest. Perhaps he really was hidden away inside his silent mind. She stopped walking, but he did not. In a few minutes, he vanished from sight, blending with crowds and corridors. After school, Nicoletta saw Christo, Kathy, Rachel, and several of the others. She ran up to them. They would have spoken to Miss Quincy again. She could hardly wait for the report. "Hey, Nicky," said Christo. He rubbed her shoulders and kissed her hair. Affection came easily to Christo. He distributed it to all the girls, and they in turn were never without a smile or a kiss for him. But that was all there was. Christo never offered more, and never took more. Nor did he say a word about the first madrigal rehearsal in which Anne Louise and not Nicoletta sang soprano. So, said Nicoletta teasingly, keeping her voice light. She was mostly talking to Rachel, her sidekick, her fellow sufferer in soprano jokes. Question. $100 is lying on the ground. Who takes it? The dumb soprano or the smart soprano? Answer. The dumb soprano, of course. There's no such thing as a smart soprano. Rachel looked uncomfortable. Kathy looked embarrassed. Even Christo, who was never nervous, looked nervous. Finally, Rachel made a confused gesture with her hands like birds fluttering. Awkwardly, she mumbled,
Anne Louise is really terrific, Nicoletta. She has the best voice of any of us. She's...
Rachel seemed unable to think of what else Anne Louise might be. She's Olympic material, said Christo. Rachel managed giggles.
There's no soprano division in the Olympics, Christo.
But it was very clear. Anne Louise was miles better than Nicoletta. Nicoletta was not going to get back in. She was not going to be a madrigal again. Her friends had put no arguments before Miss Quincy.
But come with us to keyboard, Nikki,
said Rachel quickly.
There's so much to talk about. You'll have to tell us about art appreciation. I mean, is it wall-to-wall duds or what?
Keyboard was the city's only ice cream parlor with a piano. Perhaps the world's only ice cream parlor with a piano. For years and years before Nicoletta was even born, the high school madrigals had hung out there, singing whenever they felt like it. They sang current hits and ancient tunes. They sang Christmas carols and kindergarten rounds. They sang rock or country or 16th century love songs. In between, they had sundaes, milkshakes, or cokes, and stuck quarters in the old-fashioned jukebox with its glittering lights and dated music. Okay, thought Nicoletta, trying to breathe, trying to accept this slap in the face of Anne Louise's superiority. We're still friends. I can still... Anne Louise joined the group. She was an ordinary-looking girl with dull brown hair and small brown eyes, but the other singers did not look at her as if they saw anything ordinary. They were full of admiration. She'll wear my crimson gown, thought Nicoletta. She'll put my sparkling crown on her plain hair. She'll sing my part. Christo rubbed Anne Louise's shoulders and kissed her hair exactly as he had done Nicoletta's. Anne Louise bit her lip with embarrassment and pleasure and said,
Are you sure you want me along?
Of course we do, the rest chorused. You're a madrigal now. And I'm not, thought Nicoletta. Rachel and Kathy protested, but Nicoletta did not go to a keyboard with them. She claimed she had to help her mother at home. They knew it was a lie, but it certainly made things easier for everybody. With visible gratitude, the new arrangement of madrigals left in their new lineup. Nicoletta headed for the school bus, which she rarely took. Christo had a van and usually ferried madrigals wherever they went, but she did not get on the bus after all. Walking purposefully down the road, knowing his destination, was the dark and silent boy from Art Appreciation. The high school was not located for walking home. It had been built a decade ago in a rural area so that it could be wrapped in playing fields of most impressive kind. No student lived within walking distance. Yellow buses awaiting their loads snaked around the two roads, slowly filling with kids from every corner of the city. Yet the boy walked. And Nicoletta, because she was lost, followed him. And that's the end of chapter 1. My friends, thank you for listening. Please tune in tomorrow for chapter 2 and our continuing story of The Stranger by Caroline B. Cooney. This has been Brandon Coprich. Good night and much love.